The clinking of silverware against fine china sounded like a death knell. Laughter from other tables in the ridiculously expensive restaurant felt like a personal insult, a mocking chorus to the silent, suffocating opera unfolding at our own. Arlene, my mother-in-law, had a smile plastered on her face so tight I thought her skin might crack. Charles, my husband's brother, was watching me with a smug, knowing look that made my stomach turn. And Thomas, my husband, the love of my life, was staring down at his half-eaten slice of birthday cake, his face the color of a ripe tomato. I took a shaky breath, the air thick with unspoken words and the cloying scent of buttercream frosting. I recently learned, I began, my voice trembling just enough to betray the storm raging inside me, that a story has been going around. A story Thomas told all of you about me, about how I pressured him into our marriage. Every eye at the table darted from me to Thomas. The silence was absolute now. Even the waiter, who had been hovering nearby, froze in place. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the months of cold shoulders and snide comments suddenly making a horrifying kind of sense. Arlene was the first to break the spell, letting out a brittle little laugh. "Oh, dear," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "I'm sure he didn't mean it that way. You know how men are when they've had a few drinks." But I wasn't looking at Arlene. My eyes were locked on my husband. "Is that true, Thomas?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "Is that why you lied? In front of everyone, tell me why you would lie about something so important to me. To us." He finally looked up. And the man I saw wasn't the one I'd married. His eyes, usually warm and full of laughter, were cold, flat, and empty. He held my gaze for a long, agonizing second before he spoke, his voice void of any emotion. "Well," he said, the word cutting through the room like a shard of glass. "It's not like you're some great catch anyway." My world didn't just crack, it shattered into a million unrecognizable pieces. The sound in the room faded to a dull roar in my ears. I felt like I'd been physically struck, the breath knocked from my lungs. His own family looked stunned. Even Arlene seemed taken aback for a moment. But I didn't wait for their recovery. I didn't wait for another word. My world had been a lie. For days earlier, my world had been whole. For days earlier, I had woken up next to Thomas in our sun-drenched Denver apartment, the Rocky Mountains a hazy purple silhouette in the distance. The air was crisp, the way it always is in late spring. He had brought me coffee in bed, just like he did most mornings. He kissed the top of my head and whispered, "Morning, beautiful," his voice still rough with sleep. We had been married for 3 years, together for 5, and that simple gesture still made my heart feel full. I thought we were happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. Ours was a partnership built on inside jokes, shared dreams, and a comfortable silence that only comes from knowing someone completely. We were the couple our friends pointed to as proof that true love existed. We talked about everything, from the mundane details of our workdays to our plans for buying a house in the suburbs and maybe, eventually, starting a family. I remembered the year before we got engaged. It was Thomas who first started bringing up marriage. He was the one who would leave his laptop open to pages of engagement rings, casually asking me which styles I liked. He was the one who, on our 4th anniversary, took me to the spot where we had our first date and talked about how he couldn't imagine his future without me in it. The proposal itself, a few months later, hadn't been a surprise, it had been the natural, mutual culmination of a love story we were writing together. The idea that I had somehow pressured him, manipulated him into it, was so laughably false that it felt like a plot from a bad movie. I was 29 when he proposed. The idea of being alone at 30 had never once crossed my mind as a source of terror. I was with the man I loved. Why would I be terrified? Last Thursday, that perfect world began to unravel. I was in the middle of a marketing meeting when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Scarlett, my sister-in-law. "Hey. Free for a quick lunch today?" Scarlett and I weren't best friends, but we were friendly. We got along fine at family gatherings, exchanging pleasantries and occasionally liking each other's Instagram posts. A spontaneous lunch invitation was a little unusual, but I didn't think much of it. I figured she was in the area and just wanted to catch up. Sure. I texted back. The Gilded Spoon near my office in an hour. Perfect. See you then. I arrived a few minutes early and grabbed a table on the patio. It was a beautiful day, and the downtown lunch crowd was buzzing with energy. When Scarlett arrived, I could tell something was wrong immediately. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She hugged me a little too tightly, her movements jerky and anxious. Hey, good to see you, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Everything okay? Yeah, fine. Just a crazy week at work, she replied, but she couldn't look me in the eye. She sat down and immediately started fidgeting with her napkin, folding it into a tiny, precise square, then unfolding it, then folding it again. We ordered, and the small talk that followed was excruciatingly awkward. We talked about the weather, a new show on Netflix, her kid's latest soccer tournament. Through it all, I could feel a palpable tension coming from her. She kept glancing at me, then quickly looking away, as if she were gathering the courage to say something difficult. I started to worry. Was something wrong with her husband, Nathan? Was one of her parents sick? Finally, after the waiter had brought our salads, she put her shredded napkin down on the table and took a deep breath. Okay, Clara, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I have to tell you something. I've been going back and forth about this for weeks, and I feel like a horrible person for not saying anything sooner. My stomach tightened. Scarlett, what is it? You're scaring me. Her eyes filled with tears. It's about Thomas. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. My mind raced through the worst-case scenarios. Was he sick? Was he in some kind of trouble? Had he cheated? A few weeks ago, she began, her voice shaking, there was a family barbecue at Arlene's. You couldn't make it because you were visiting your aunt in the hospital, remember? I nodded, the memory clear in my mind. My Aunt Carol had just had knee surgery. Well, Thomas was there, and he was drinking. A lot. More than usual. And he started talking. To everyone. To Charles and Paula, to my husband Nathan, to some of Arlene's friends. She paused, taking another shaky breath. He told them that you basically trapped him into marrying you. The words hung in the air between us, nonsensical and ugly. I just stared at her, certain I had misheard. What? Trapped him? What are you talking about? Scarlett looked miserable, but she pressed on. He said you were terrified of turning 30 and being single. He told everyone that you started dropping all these hints about getting married, constantly talking about all your friends who were engaged, and made him feel like if he didn't propose, you would leave him. He painted this picture of you as this desperate woman who manipulated him into it. I just sat there, my mouth hanging open, my fork frozen halfway to my lips. The sounds of the busy patio, the laughter, the traffic, the clatter of dishes faded into a distant hum. I couldn't process what she was saying. It wasn't just a lie, it was a complete fabrication, a malicious rewriting of our entire history. That never happened, I finally managed to stammer. None of that is true. He was the one who brought up marriage. He was the one who started looking at rings. I know, Scarlett said softly, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Or at least, I suspected. Nathan was shocked, too. He said it sounded completely out of character for you. But Clara, his mom, and Charles, they ate it up. They believed every word. Suddenly, the last few months clicked into place with sickening clarity. Arlene's recent coldness, the way she'd make little comments about how some women will do anything to get a ring on their finger. I had always dismissed it as her being her usual judgmental self, but now I understood. Her precious son had poisoned her against me. And Charles, with his condescending smirks and passive-aggressive jokes about Thomas being whipped, it wasn't just sibling rivalry. He thought I was some pathetic, manipulative shrew. They had been treating me differently for months, all based on this disgusting story, and I had been completely oblivious. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Because it's gotten worse," she admitted. "Arlene brings it up all the time now. It's become this accepted family truth. And at that barbecue, Thomas didn't just say it once. He went on and on about it. Nathan said it was like he was trying to convince himself as much as everyone else. I couldn't stand by and let you walk into family gatherings not knowing what they were all thinking and saying behind your back. You don't deserve that." I spent the rest of the lunch in a total fog. I barely touched my food. I don't even remember what I said to Scarlett when we left. My mind was a chaotic swirl of hurt, confusion, and a white-hot anger that was starting to build deep in my gut. I walked back to my office and locked myself in a bathroom stall, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of the senseless. The man I loved, the man I had built a life with, had assassinated my character to the people who were supposed to be my second family. And for what? For sympathy. To make himself look better. The rest of the workday was a blur. I stared at my computer screen, but the words and images meant nothing. All I could see was Thomas's smiling face in the photos on my desk, and all I could hear was Scarlett's voice repeating the lies he had told. When I finally drove home that evening, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I wasn't sad anymore. I was furious. I walked into our beautiful, sunny apartment, the home we had built together, and waited. Waited for the liar I called my husband to come home and explain himself. Thomas walked through the door around 7, humming a cheerful tune. He dropped his briefcase by the door and loosened his tie, a relaxed smile on his face. "Hey, honey," he said, walking toward me for a kiss. "Sorry I'm a little late, the traffic was brutal." "What's for dinner?" "I'm starving." I didn't move. I just stood in the middle of our living room, my arms crossed, watching him. His smile faltered as he finally registered the look on my face. "Whoa," he said, holding up his hands in a mock surrender. "What did I do? Forget to take out the recycling again?" My voice was eerily calm when I spoke. "I had lunch with Scarlett today." His face went blank for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes before he quickly masked it. "Oh yeah? How is she? I haven't seen her in a couple of weeks." He tried to sound casual, but his voice was a little too high, a little too forced. "She's fine," I said, taking a step closer. "She told me about the barbecue at your mom's place a few weeks ago. The one I missed." The color drained from his face. He knew exactly where this was going. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just stood there, caught. "She told me what you said, Thomas," I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. "She told me how you got drunk and told your entire family that I manipulated you into proposing. That I trapped you because I was desperate not to be alone at 30. She told me everything." He finally found his voice, and it was dripping with defensive anger. "Scarlett is a gossip who loves to exaggerate," he snapped. "You know how she is. She takes everything and blows it completely out of proportion. It was a joke, Clara. A stupid, offhand comment that everyone took way too seriously." "A joke?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that didn't feel like my own. "You destroyed my reputation with your family, and you call it a joke? Arlene has been treating me like dirt for months, Thomas. Charles looks at me like I'm something he scraped off his shoe. Was that part of the joke, too?" He started pacing the room, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I was drunk, okay? We'd had that stupid fight earlier that week about the anniversary plans, and I was just venting. It was guy talk. It got out of hand. I didn't mean for anyone to actually believe it. Venting is complaining that I leave my socks on the floor. I shouted, my control finally snapping. Venting is not fabricating a detailed, malicious lie about my character. Why would you say something so incredibly untrue? Why would you paint me as some pathetic, desperate woman? He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression shifting from defensive to dismissive. You're overreacting, he said, his voice cold. It's not that big a deal. It's family stuff. It would have blown over if Scarlett hadn't stuck her nose in it. The gaslighting was so blatant, so shameless, it took my breath away. He wasn't just lying, he was trying to convince me that my reaction to his lie was the actual problem. That this was somehow my fault, or Scarlett's fault. Anyone's fault but his. Not a big deal. I whispered, the rage draining out of me, replaced by a profound, chilling hurt. You made me a villain in our own love story, Thomas. You took something that was supposed to be ours, something beautiful and mutual, and you twisted it into something ugly to make yourself look like a victim to your mother. How is that not a big deal? The conversation went nowhere after that. He refused to admit the gravity of what he'd done. He kept circling back to the same pathetic excuses. He was drunk, he was venting, I was being too sensitive. It was like trying to argue with a brick wall. A brick wall that kept telling you that you were crazy for being upset that it had fallen on you. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. The sight of him, his handsome face set in a mask of stubborn denial, made me feel physically ill. I can't even look at you right now, I said, my voice flat and exhausted. I need some space. I turned and walked into our spare bedroom, closing the door behind me. I heard him call my name once, but I ignored him. I spent the night wrapped in a spare comforter, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every cold look from Arlene, every smug smile from Charles, every word of Thomas's betrayal. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. Classic Thomas. Avoid the problem until it goes away. He made coffee, chattered about a project at work, and kissed me goodbye as if we were the same happy couple we had been just 2 days before. But something inside me had fundamentally broken. The trust I'd had in him, the bedrock of our entire relationship, had been pulverized. For the next few days, I moved through life in a daze. I tried to process it, to understand the why. Why would the man who claimed to love me do something so cruel? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. Thomas had always been overly concerned with what his family, especially his mother, thought of him. He'd always deflected blame when he made a mistake. I just had never been on the receiving end of his most toxic behavior before. The following weekend was Arlene's 60th birthday. A big dinner was planned at a fancy restaurant downtown. Thomas insisted we still go. It'll look bad if we cancel now, he'd said, completely missing the irony. It'll just create more drama. You mean more drama than you've already created? I'd shot back. But a part of me, a foolish, naive part, agreed to go. I wanted to look them all in the eye. I wanted to clear my name. I thought if they heard the truth from me, maybe they would understand. Looking back, it was one of the stupidest decisions of my life. I was walking into the lion's den, armed with nothing but the truth, not realizing the lions didn't care about the truth at all. The dinner was an exercise in passive-aggressive torture. The entire family was there, Arlene, reigning like a queen at the head of the table, Charles and his wife, Paula, who just looked deeply uncomfortable, Scarlett and Nathan, who both gave me sympathetic looks when they thought no one was watching, and a few other assorted relatives. The tension was so thick you could have cut it with a steak knife. Arlene barely acknowledged my existence, except to ask me to pass the salt. Charles kept giving me those smug, triumphant looks, as if he'd won some secret competition I didn't even know I was playing. I tried to act normal. I smiled, I made small talk, I complimented Arlene on her dress. I played the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law, all while my insides were screaming. By the time dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate cake with "Happy 60th, Arlene," written in gold icing, I couldn't take it anymore. The hypocrisy, the silent judgment, the man sitting next to me pretending everything was fine, it was suffocating me. I decided it was time. When a lull fell over the table as everyone was finishing their cake, I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was it. This was my chance to set the record straight. "I'd like to say something, if that's okay," I said. My voice didn't even tremble. It was clear and steady. Everyone stopped and looked at me, surprised. I never made speeches at family gatherings. "I recently learned," I began, making eye contact with each person at the table, "that Thomas had told you all a story about me pressuring him into marriage, and I wanted to set the record straight." I laid it all out calmly, rationally. I explained that it simply wasn't true, that our decision to get married had been mutual, and that I was deeply hurt he would misrepresent our relationship in such a fundamental way. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone looked at Thomas, whose face was rapidly turning a shade of crimson. Arlene started making excuses for him, babbling about how he probably didn't mean it that way, how boys will be boys. That's when I turned to him directly. I ignored his mother, ignored the shocked faces of his relatives. I looked right at the man I had promised to love and honor for the rest of my life. "Is that true, Thomas?" I asked. "Right here, in front of everyone, tell me why you would lie about something so important to me." And that's when he said it. That's when he looked me straight in the eye with that cold, dead expression I'd never seen before and delivered the final, fatal blow to what was left of my heart. "Well," he said. "It's not like you're some great catch anyway." I felt like I'd been slapped across the face. A collective gasp went around the table. Without saying another word, I grabbed my purse, stood up, and walked out of the restaurant. I could hear Thomas calling my name, a frantic, pathetic sound that was too little, too late. But I didn't stop. I just kept walking, past the sympathetic hostess, out into the cool night air, until I reached my car. I drove to a generic hotel off the highway and checked in for the night. I went up to my sterile, impersonal room, locked the door, and turned off my phone. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. I just sat on the edge of the bed, the city lights twinkling outside my window, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, had just publicly and deliberately humiliated me to save his own skin. Our marriage wasn't just broken, he had set it on fire and danced on the ashes. The next morning, I braced myself and turned my phone back on. It immediately exploded with notifications. 27 missed calls from Thomas. A flood of texts. The first few were angry, accusing me of embarrassing him, of ruining his mother's birthday. Then came a few half-hearted apologies, claiming he didn't mean what he said, that he'd just panicked. But the latest ones had taken a dark, alarming turn. The final message, sent just an hour ago, made my blood run cold. "If you don't call me back and apologize to my mom for causing a scene, I swear to God I will tell all our friends you cheated on me with Mark." Mark was my ex-boyfriend from college. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade. The accusation was completely, utterly false. But Thomas was smart. He knew that a close mutual friend of ours had just gone through a horrible, public breakup because of cheating. He knew how our friend group had instantly sided against the cheater, ostracizing them completely. He wasn't just threatening me with a lie. He was threatening to socially execute me with a lie he knew would be believed because of the context. And to make sure I knew he was serious, he attached a screenshot. It was a drafted message, all written out, ready to be sent to our group chat. The words were there, in black and white, accusing me of things I had never done. I stared at the screen, a new kind of horror dawning on me. This wasn't just a man who had lied to his family. This was a man who was now blackmailing me. The man I married, the man who was supposed to protect me, was now my biggest threat. I hadn't just lost a husband. I had gained an enemy. I didn't go back to the apartment. I couldn't. After reading that text, the home we shared no longer felt like a sanctuary, it felt like the headquarters of an enemy combatant. I drove straight to my friend Stacy's place, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug without a word. I spent the first hour on her couch, not crying, just numbly showing her the string of messages, culminating in the screenshot of his blackmail. Stacy, ever the pragmatist, read every word with a thunderous expression. When she was done, she put the phone down, went to her kitchen, and came back with a bottle of red wine and 2 large glasses. "Okay," she said, pouring generously. "First, you're staying here as long as you need. Second, this man is not your husband anymore. He's a liability. You need to talk to a lawyer. Tomorrow." For almost 2 weeks, Stacy's spare bedroom, which also served as her home office, became my refuge. It was a small space, cluttered with design proofs and fabric swatches, but it was the safest I had felt in days. The first few nights, we stayed up late, drinking wine while I read her the increasingly unhinged texts that Thomas sent. They were a masterclass in psychological whiplash. One message would be a desperate, pleading, "I'm so sorry, baby. Please come home. I can't live without you." The next, often just an hour later, would be a venomous tirade, "You're ruining my life and making a fool of me. You'll pay for this." Stacy kept repeating her mantra, "Lawyer. Get a lawyer. ASAP." I resisted at first. It felt so final, so drastic. How did we go from talking about buying a house to talking about divorce lawyers in the span of a single week? A small, stupid part of me still held on to the image of the man I'd married, believing that somewhere under this monstrous behavior, he was still in there. But after Thomas started involving his mom in the drama, sending texts like, "My mom is heartbroken by what you've done," I knew this wasn't going to resolve itself. He was building an army, and I was all alone. The moment that finally broke my resistance came the following Tuesday. I was in the break room at work, trying to choke down a sad desk salad, when my coworker, Megan, popped her head in. "Hey Clara," she said, her eyes wide with a sort of vicarious excitement. "Your husband is at reception asking for you. He has the most beautiful bouquet of flowers I've ever seen." A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. He had come to my workplace. He had cornered me. I felt completely ambushed. I considered telling Megan to say I was in a meeting, to say I wasn't there, but I knew it would just create a bigger scene. The last thing I wanted was office gossip. So I smoothed down my skirt, took a deep breath, and walked out to the lobby. There he was, standing by the reception desk, holding a massive bouquet of lilies and rosesme favorites. He was smiling his charming, public smile, the one that always won everyone over. To my co-workers walking by, he looked like the most romantic, devoted husband in the world. But I saw the gesture for what it was, a performance. The flowers weren't for me, they were for his audience. "We need to talk outside," I said, my voice low and firm, ignoring the bouquet. His smile tightened, but he nodded. "Of course." As soon as the lobby doors closed behind us and we were standing on the busy downtown sidewalk, his entire demeanor changed. The charming mask fell away, replaced by a hard, impatient expression. "The flowers were just for show." "What is this, Thomas?" I asked, gesturing toward the bouquet he was still holding awkwardly. "This has to stop, Clara," he said, his voice sharp, completely ignoring my question. "You need to come home. And you need to call my mother and apologize." I stared at him, incredulous. "Apologize? Apologize for what? For you publicly humiliating me after lying about me for months? You're blowing everything out of proportion," he seethed, stepping closer. People walking by started to glance in our direction. "You made a scene at her birthday party. You embarrassed me in front of my entire family. They will never respect you, or us, if you don't make this right. I tried to stay calm, to keep my voice even. I am not going to apologize for standing up for myself. The only person who needs to apologize is you. He kept cutting me off, his voice getting louder, more aggressive. This is ridiculous. You're being hysterical. We had a life, a good life, and you're throwing it all away over a few stupid words. People were openly staring now. I felt my face flush with a mixture of anger and humiliation. This was exactly what he wanted to create, a public spectacle, to make me so uncomfortable that I would just give in to make it stop. If you can't have a reasonable conversation, I said, turning to walk away, then I have nothing more to say to you. That's when he grabbed my arm. It wasn't hard enough to hurt, not really, but it was firm. A grip of control, meant to stop me from leaving. A clear message: you don't get to walk away from me. Something inside me snapped. All the fear and hurt transformed into pure, cold fury. I stopped and looked him straight in the eyes. Let go of my arm right now, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. If you don't let go of me this instant, I will scream. I will scream so loud that every person on this block will hear me, and then I will call security. He dropped my arm like it was on fire. His face was a mixture of shock and rage. He had never seen me like this before. He had pushed me too far, and he knew it. You're acting dramatic, he hissed, his eyes darting around to see who was watching. This is why they never liked you. You're always so dramatic. Without another word, I turned my back on him and walked back into my building. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely swipe my key card to get through the turnstile. I didn't look back. When I finally got back to my desk, I collapsed into my chair, my heart pounding against my ribs. A string of texts from him immediately came through. You embarrassed me again. You'll regret not fixing this while you had the chance. That was it. That was the moment. The line had been crossed. He had gone from emotional manipulation to physical intimidation. I picked up my phone, my hands still trembling, and I took Stacy's advice. I Googled top divorce lawyers in Denver, and made a call. The lawyer's name was Paul, a strange coincidence that wasn't lost on me. Unlike my sister-in-law, this Paula was all business. She had a sharp suit, a sharper haircut, and an air of no-nonsense competence that was incredibly reassuring. I sat in her sleek, minimalist office overlooking the city and told her everything, right from the beginning. I showed her the texts, described the scene at the birthday party, and recounted the confrontation outside my office. She listened intently, taking notes, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me, her gaze direct and unflinching. Clara, she said, her voice calm and measured. First, I want you to know that you are not overreacting. Your husband's behavior is not normal marital discord. It's following a classic, and very dangerous, pattern of escalation. The lies, the gaslighting, the public humiliation, the blackmail, and now the physical intimidation. This is a deliberate campaign of control. Hearing a professional validate my feelings, to confirm that I wasn't crazy, felt like a dam breaking inside me. I finally let the tears come, silent tears of relief and grief that I had been holding back for days. Paula pushed a box of tissues across the desk. You need to protect yourself, immediately, she continued. From this moment on, I want you to follow these rules. 1. All communication with him will be in writing, only text or email. No phone calls. We need a written record of everything. 2. Do not, under any circumstances, meet with him alone again. If a meeting is necessary, it will be in a very public place, and you will let someone know where you are and when you're expected to be done. 3. I need you to start quietly gathering all of your financial documents. Bank statements, pay stubs, tax returns, retirement account information. Knowledge is power in this situation. She paused, then her expression softened slightly. Finally, I think we need to consider filing for a legal separation. It will put legal boundaries in place and send a very clear message that you are not playing his games anymore. I felt sick hearing her talk about separation, about filing legal documents. Despite everything, the lies, the threats, the arm-grabbing, there was still this small, wounded part of me that kept whispering, "But we're married. We took vows. We're supposed to work through problems. Marriage was supposed to be forever." Paula must have seen the conflict on my face because she leaned forward and said something that would echo in my head for weeks to come. "Clara, marriage is a partnership based on mutual respect. Lying to your family to assassinate your character isn't respect. Humiliating you in public isn't respect. Threatening to spread lies about you is not respect. It is a fundamental violation of trust. A violation of trust." The phrase hit me with the force of a physical blow. That's what this was. It wasn't just a bad fight or a series of mistakes. It was a betrayal so profound it had shattered the very foundation of our relationship. Thomas hadn't just broken a promise, he had violated the sacred trust that was supposed to be the core of our marriage. And you can't rebuild a house after the foundation has turned to dust. Armed with Paula's advice and a newfound, fragile sense of resolve, I sent Thomas a message. It was carefully worded, devoid of emotion, just the facts. "I am willing to meet to discuss our situation. Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m., at the Daily Grind coffee shop on Larimer Square. It's a public place. Let me know if that works." He agreed surprisingly quickly. "Of course. See you then." His easy compliance made me suspicious, but also foolishly hopeful. Maybe the shock of me going completely silent for days had knocked some sense into him. Maybe he had finally calmed down and was ready to have a real conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early on Saturday and picked a table near the back, one with a clear view of the door but also with enough ambient noise to prevent eavesdropping. I ordered a black coffee I had no intention of drinking and sat there, my heart a nervous drum against my ribs. When he walked in, my first thought was how normal he looked. He was just Thomas, my handsome husband in his favorite worn-out jeans and a gray Henley that brought out the blue in his eyes. For a terrifying second, I felt a pang of longing for the life we'd had, for the man I thought he was. Then he sat down, and the illusion shattered. He immediately launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "Clara, thank you for meeting me," he began, his voice low and earnest, leaning across the small table. "These last few weeks have been hell. I miss you so much. I miss our life. I know I've made mistakes, I know I've said things I shouldn't have, but we can get past this. We have to. What we have is too important to throw away over a misunderstanding." I let him talk. I watched as he cycled through his greatest hits, the apologies that weren't really apologies, the talk of forgiveness and moving forward, the romanticized memories of our relationship. It was a performance, and he was playing the part of the remorseful, loving husband who had simply made a few missteps. When he finally paused for breath, I asked him the one question that still burned in my mind, the question that started this whole nightmare. "Why did you tell your family I manipulated you into marriage?" He sighed, a long, theatrical sound, as if I were bringing up some tedious piece of ancient history. "Clara, we've been over this. I was frustrated after that argument we had about my family's vacation plans. I went to my mom's house, I was drinking, and I just wanted some sympathy. I said something stupid to get my family on my side. I never, ever thought they'd take it so seriously, or that it would get back to you. It was a dumb mistake." I felt a cold, hard anger settle in my chest. "Cut the crap, Thomas," I said, my voice sharp. He looked taken aback. I rarely used that tone with him. "Scarlett told me this has been going on for months, not just after one argument. This lie has been your family's reality for a long time. They have been treating me differently because of what you told them, and you stood by and let it happen." He tried to interrupt, to protest, but I kept going, my words coming faster now. "And how do you think I should feel? How would you feel if I went to my family and told them that you are an emotionally manipulative bully who threatens to spread lies about me when you don't get your way? Because that's not a lie, is it? That's what's actually happening right now. His face darkened. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing hiss. I am not threatening you. I am trying to protect myself. You're the one who is trying to turn everyone against me. You're the one who embarrassed me in front of my family and my coworkers. And the screenshot? I challenged. The message you drafted, accusing me of cheating? Was that just you protecting yourself, too? He had the audacity to look wounded. That was a bluff, he said, shaking his head. It was a desperate move to get you to come home so we could work things out privately, without lawyers and your friends telling you what to do. I was trying to save our marriage. I laughed out loud, a short, humorless bark of a sound that made the couple at the next table glance over. You don't save a marriage by threatening to burn down your partner's life. You don't fix things by lying and manipulating. There is nothing to work out if you can't even admit that what you've done is fundamentally wrong. We went back and forth like that for almost 2 hours. It was a dizzying, exhausting carousel of deflection and minimization. Every time I thought we were getting somewhere, every time I presented him with the cold, hard facts of his behavior, he would twist things around or accuse me of making too big a deal out of a few comments to his family. He insisted that everyone vents about their spouse sometimes. Venting is complaining about real things, Thomas. I finally said, my voice raw with frustration. It's complaining that I snore, or that I spend too much money on shoes. It is not making up a complete, damaging lie that attacks my character and poisons your entire family against me. Do you not see the difference? He just stared at me, his eyes blank. He didn't see it. Or he refused to. By the end, I was mentally and emotionally drained. It was clear this was getting us nowhere. He would never take true responsibility. In his mind, he was the victim of my overreaction. As we were getting ready to leave, he dropped one last bomb. My mother wants to have lunch with you, he said, as if this were a perfectly reasonable suggestion. She wants to clear the air. I stared at him, speechless for a moment before I burst out laughing again. Clear the air. The woman who believes I'm a desperate spinster who trapped her precious son wants to clear the air with me. What is there to talk about? Is she going to demand I apologize to her for the behavior of her lying, manipulative son? Thomas's face flushed with anger. She's upset about the scene you made at her birthday, he snapped. She's trying to be the bigger person here, to make peace for the sake of the family. I'll think about it, I said, standing up, knowing full well I had zero intention of sitting through a lunch where I would undoubtedly be expected to grovel for his forgiveness. The meeting with Thomas left me feeling more confused and frustrated than ever. It was clear he was incapable of genuine remorse. The next day, I was numbly scrolling through Instagram, trying to distract myself, when I noticed something odd. Thomas had posted a new photo. It was a picture of us from our anniversary dinner last year, a professionally taken shot where we both looked ridiculously happy. He had written a long, emotional caption beneath it. Marriage isn't always easy. Sometimes you go through tough times that test you. But real love is about fighting for each other, even when it's hard. I'm committed to our marriage and our future, no matter what. I love you, Clara. He had tagged me in it. Which meant all of our mutual friends, all of my family, all of his family, would see it. My blood ran cold. This was a calculated, manipulative move. First, he was creating this public narrative that we were just a normal couple going through a rough patch, but that he, the noble husband, was fighting to work it out. Second, he knew I would see it and be put in an impossible position. Either I respond positively and validate his lie, or I ignore it and look like a cold, heartless wife who was rejecting her husband's heartfelt plea. It was psychological warfare, plain and simple. I texted him immediately, my fingers flying across the screen. Take down that post. Now. His response was instantaneous. Why? I was just trying to show you, and everyone, that I'm committed to us. You're being unnecessarily hostile. We are not working through anything until you take responsibility for lying about me and threatening me, I wrote back. Taking our private problems public is a manipulative tactic, and you know it. Take it down. After nearly an hour of back and forth, with him playing the victim and me refusing to back down, he finally removed it. But not before posting a vague, passive-aggressive Instagram story that read, "You can try your best, but sometimes that's not enough." Later that same day, Scarlett messaged me. "Hey, just checking in. How are you holding up?" We hadn't talked much since our initial lunch. I gave her a brief, sanitized update, telling her we were trying to talk things through. She hesitated before typing her next message. "I just want you to know Thomas has been telling people you're refusing to talk to him. He's telling everyone he's so worried about you, that you've just shut down completely." My stomach twisted. The narrative he was creating was that I was the unreasonable one, the one who wouldn't communicate, when in reality, I was the one who had suggested our meeting. He was painting me as unstable, all while playing the part of the concerned, patient husband. It was so diabolical, so meticulously crafted, that it terrified me. He wasn't just lying to his family anymore. He was orchestrating a full-blown smear campaign against me to our entire social circle. The man I married was a stranger, and that stranger was systematically trying to destroy me. What else is he saying? I typed back to Scarlett, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. She was hesitant. "I don't want to upset you more. Please, Scarlett. I need to know. I need to know what I'm up against." A few moments passed before her reply came through. "At a family dinner on Sunday you obviously weren't there. Thomas told everyone that you were going through something. He was very vague, but he made it sound like you were having some kind of personal crisis. He asked everyone to be patient with you." Then Arlene went on this long rant about how marriage is sacred and people today give up too easily when things get hard. The implication was clear. The entire family is now under the impression that you're emotionally fragile and I'm the long-suffering husband trying to hold things together. I thanked her for her honesty, my fingers feeling like lead. So that was his new strategy. If he couldn't bully me into coming back, he would discredit me. He would paint me as an unstable woman, an unreliable narrator of my own life. It was a terrifyingly effective tactic. If people believed I wasn't thinking clearly, they would dismiss anything I said about his lies, his threats, his aggression. They would see it all as the paranoid ramblings of a woman on the edge. That weekend, things escalated from psychological warfare to a full-blown ambush. I had arranged with Thomas via text to go to our apartment on Saturday morning to pick up more of my clothes and some important work files I needed. We had explicitly discussed the timing. He was supposed to be out playing golf with his friends. He knew I was coming. But when I used my key to open the door, my heart nearly stopped. He was there. And he wasn't alone. Thomas and Arlene were sitting side by side on the living room sofa, their postures rigid, their expressions a bizarre mixture of concern and solemnity. They looked like they were waiting for an intervention. My intervention. I froze in the doorway, my duffel bag dropping from my hand with a soft thud. This was a setup. He had lied about leaving. He had brought his mother here to corner me. Arlene stood up as soon as she saw me, her face arranged in an expression of deep, synthetic worry. "Clara, dear," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We were so worried about you. We just want to talk. We want to help." Thomas remained on the sofa, a concerned look on his face that I now recognized as completely fake. It was the same look he wore in his manipulative Instagram post. I was so shocked, I just stood there for a moment, staring at them. Then, the shock gave way to a surge of adrenaline. "I am only here to get my things," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "I am not interested in having a conversation with either of you." I tried to walk past them toward the bedroom, but Arlene moved to block my path. She started following me around the apartment as I began pulling clothes from the closet, her voice a relentless drone in my ear. She talked about family loyalty, about how marriage takes work from both sides, about the sanctity of vows. I tried to ignore her, focusing on gathering my things, but she wouldn't stop. Thomas told us everything, dear, she said, her voice softening into a tone of feigned sympathy. He told us all about your insecurities around turning 30, your fears of being left behind. It's understandable. But you can't let those fears destroy your marriage. That was it. That was the line. I lost it. I whipped around, a sweater clutched in my fist. He lied to you. I yelled, my voice echoing in the too quiet apartment. Your son has been lying to you for months. I never pressured him into marriage. I was never insecure. And right now, he is threatening to spread false rumors about me cheating if I don't apologize to you for his behavior. Arlene looked genuinely surprised for a split second before her face hardened into a familiar mask of disapproval. Well, you're clearly upset and not thinking straight, she said dismissively. Thomas seized his moment. He jumped up from the sofa, pointing a finger at me. See what I mean, Mom, he said, his voice filled with theatrical despair. She twists everything I say. She's being completely unreasonable. And in that horrifying instant, I understood. The entire setup, the ambush, Arlene's preceit was all a performance designed for an audience of one. It was to show his mother, his primary ally, exactly how unstable and hysterical I was being. He had deliberately provoked me, knowing I would react, just so he could turn to his mother and say, see? This is what I have to deal with. My blood ran cold. The level of premeditated manipulation was terrifying. They were working together, a tag team of gaslighters, to make me believe I was the problem. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone from my pocket and hit the record button. I held it up, the red light glowing. I am now recording this, I announced, my voice trembling but loud. I am documenting this ambush, which I did not consent to. I will be leaving immediately. Arlene's eyes widened at the sight of the phone. She tried to block the bedroom door. We need to talk this out like adults, Clara. I held the phone up higher, aiming it directly at her face. If you do not move out of my way, I will call the police and report that you are unlawfully detaining me in my own home. She stepped aside instantly, muttering something under her breath about dramatic millennials. I grabbed the duffel bag, which was only half full, and fled. I didn't stop until I was in my car, speeding away from the home that now felt like a prison. Once I was a few blocks away, I pulled over to the side of the road and broke down completely, sobbing with a mixture of rage, fear, and profound grief for the man I had once loved, the man who was now a monster. When I got back to Stacy's, I immediately called Paula. She was furious, but not surprised. This is a major escalation, Clara, she said, her voice grim. They work together to corner and intimidate you. This is no longer just a marital dispute. This is harassment. She advised me to send Thomas a formal communication, through her, stating that I would only collect the rest of my belongings with a neutral third party present, and that any further communication must go through our lawyers. She also urged me to start the legal separation process immediately. We need to put the full force of the law between you and him, she said. The next morning, I received a long text from Thomas. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. I'm so sorry about the misunderstanding yesterday, it began. I completely forgot you were coming, and my mom just happened to stop by to drop off some food. Your overreaction really hurt us both, and it shows how much we need to sit down as a family and work things out calmly. The blatant, shameless lie infuriated me. He was still trying to rewrite reality, to paint me as the unstable one who had imagined the entire ambush. I didn't respond directly. I just forwarded the text, and my video recording, to Paula. Through my lawyer, I arranged to have a moving company pack up the rest of my essential belongings while Thomas was at work the following Wednesday. Stacy went with me to supervise. Walking through the apartment felt strange, like visiting a museum of a life that was no longer mine. The photos of us smiling on the walls, the stupid souvenirs from our vacations, the coffee mugs he'd bought Methy all felt like artifacts from another person's existence. We got everything done in under 2 hours. Clothes, personal items, important documents, and a few sentimental things I couldn't bear to leave behind. I left most of the furniture, the dishes, the life we had built. I just wanted out. I also decided it was time to move out of Stacy's. As wonderful as she'd been, I needed my own space to breathe, a place that Thomas couldn't associate with me. I found a small, furnished apartment available for a month-to-month rental in a different part of the city. I signed the lease and planned to move in the following week. Thomas didn't know the address, and I was going to keep it that way. The day before I moved into my new place, I received a certified letter at Stacy's address. It was from Thomas. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages long. He said he'd been talking with his pastor, who had helped him realize he'd been unfair to me. He claimed he was working on himself and asked for another chance to make things right. The letter seemed sincere, almost convincing. It made me hesitate for a moment, wondering if maybe, just maybe, he was capable of change. Then I got to the last paragraph. My pastor suggested that the best way to start fresh is with total honesty. He thinks we should meet with my entire family to clear the air and begin our reconciliation with everyone present. My blood turned to ice. It was another trap. What pastor in their right mind would suggest bringing his entire enabling, toxic family into our private marital issues? It was so obviously another manipulation tactic, a plan likely cooked up by him and Arlene. It was another ambush in the making, this time cloaked in the guise of religion and reconciliation. I crumpled the letter in my fist. He would never change. This was who he was. Moving into my own apartment felt like taking my first breath of clean air after being trapped in a smoke-filled room. It was small, the furniture was a mishmash of generic rental pieces, and it overlooked a noisy street, but it was mine. It was a space where Thomas had never been, a sanctuary where his manipulations and his mother's judgment couldn't reach me. For the first few days, I relished the simple peace of it. I unpacked my boxes, bought a few plants, and started to establish a routine that didn't involve constantly checking my phone for his latest psychological assault. But Thomas was not one to be ignored. When his handwritten letter failed to get a response, he switched tactics again. He started reaching out to our mutual friends. Several people messaged me, their texts all variations on the same theme: "Hey, just checking in." Thomas reached out, said he's really worried about you. Is everything okay? He was methodically laying the groundwork, building his narrative brick by brick. I was the one acting irrationally. I was the one who had disappeared without a word. He was the concerned, patient husband, desperately trying to understand what was wrong with his unstable wife. A few of our closest friends, like my friend Eva, called me directly. I gave them the bare minimum, the version Paula had advised me to stick to: Thomas and I are separating. It's been really difficult, and I just need some space right now. I didn't want to get into a public back and forth, knowing it would just feed into the drama he was creating. Eva, however, knew me too well. "That doesn't sound like you, Clara," she said during one of our calls. "It sounds like the story Thomas wants people to believe. He told me you were struggling with some personal issues that were affecting your judgment." "Personal issues?" I asked, my voice tight. "He was very vague," Eva continued, her tone laced with skepticism. "But he hinted that you might be having some kind of breakdown. I told him he was full of it. I've known you for 15 years. You sound more clear-headed and sane right now than I've heard you in months. I just wanted you to know what he's doing behind your back." I was so angry I could barely speak. Thomas was trying to control the narrative by painting me as mentally incompetent. It was such a calculated, insidious move. If people thought I wasn't thinking clearly, they'd dismiss everything I said about his behavior. Paula had warned me this was a common tactic in high-conflict separations. One person tries to systematically undermine the other's credibility to gain sympathy and support. She advised me not to engage, but to speak privately with the friends I trusted most to ensure they knew the truth. I spent the next afternoon making a few difficult phone calls, explaining the situation to my inner circle without getting into all the ugly details. Most were horrified and incredibly supportive. They said they'd already suspected Thomas's version of events wasn't the whole truth. A couple of them even admitted that they'd been uncomfortable with the way he sometimes talked about me even before all this happened. Little dismissive comments or jokes at my expense that seemed harmless at the time, but now fit into a disturbing pattern. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless, to know I wasn't entirely alone. The following week, Paula officially filed the initial paperwork for a legal separation. Thomas was served the documents at his office. I braced myself for the explosion, for the inevitable barrage of angry, accusatory texts. But it didn't come immediately. Instead, a few hours after he was served, he sent me a single, surprisingly calm text. "Can we please meet to discuss this like adults? I don't want this to get ugly." I consulted with Paula, who advised that while I wasn't obligated to meet him, it might help move things along if we could agree on some terms without a lengthy legal battle. "But you will not go alone," she insisted. "And you will meet somewhere very public, during the day." I agreed to meet him for a late lunch at a busy restaurant downtown, a place with big windows and lots of foot traffic. I even had Stacy on standby, telling her to call me exactly 45 minutes into the meeting so I had a clear exit strategy. When I arrived, he was already at the table. He stood up when I approached, awkwardly leaning in as if he was going to hug me or kiss my cheek. I instinctively stepped back and sat down immediately, putting the table firmly between us. No way was I letting him touch me after everything he'd done. He started with an apology that sounded practiced, but sincere enough. He acknowledged that threatening to spread lies about me was wrong. He said he regretted it deeply, that he'd been in a bad place emotionally and had lashed out in ways he wasn't proud of. I listened without interrupting, my face a neutral mask, trying to gauge if this was genuine remorse or just another performance. When he finished, I asked the question that had been burning in me for weeks. "Why did you tell your family I manipulated you into marriage in the first place? Forget everything else that's happened since. I need to understand the original lie. What could possibly justify that?" He looked down at his hands, a flicker of something that looked like shame crossing his face. "It was about my mom," he said quietly. She always had these specific expectations for my life. Who I would marry, when I would settle down. She's always been very controlling. When we got engaged, she expressed concerns that we were rushing things, that maybe you weren't the right fit for the family. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Instead of defending us, instead of standing up to her like I should have, I took the coward's way out. I gave her a story that would make her feel better, a story where she was right to be concerned. I made you the impulsive one, and me the sensible one who was being pressured. I thought it would just be a temporary thing, just to get her off my back until she got used to the idea of us being married. I never expected the lie to grow like it did, or for my whole family to treat you differently because of it." I was floored. He had finally admitted it. It wasn't about being drunk or venting. It was a calculated decision. He had thrown me under the bus to appease his mother. He had sacrificed my reputation and my relationship with his family to avoid having a difficult conversation with his mom. The cowardice of it was staggering. "Do you realize what you're admitting to?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You are telling me you deliberately chose to hurt me to make your own life easier." He started to backpedal, saying it wasn't that simple, that he loved me and never intended for things to get so out of hand. He said he knew he had made terrible mistakes, but he truly wanted to make things right. He suggested couples counseling, a fresh start, even moving to a different city, away from his family's influence. But it was too late. The damage was done. The man who had humiliated me at his mother's birthday dinner, who had threatened to destroy my reputation, who had ambushed me in my own home, that was the real Thomas. The charming, easygoing guy I thought I'd married was just a character he played. He got frustrated then, his calm demeanor cracking. "What will it take for you to forgive me?" he demanded. "Everyone makes mistakes, Clara. Throwing away a 5-year relationship over one bad comment is extreme." "It wasn't one comment," I shot back, my voice rising. "It was a pattern of lies, threats, and manipulation that's been going on for months, maybe longer than I even know. This isn't something we can fix in counseling, Thomas. You broke my trust in the most fundamental way possible. I don't think I'll ever be able to look at you again without wondering what lies you're telling behind my back." The conversation went in circles after that. Every time I tried to steer it toward the logistics of our separation, he would circle back to reconciliation. He couldn't seem to accept that I was serious about ending our marriage. Finally, my phone buzzed. It was Stacy, right on cue. "I have to go," I said, gathering my purse. "Any further communication should go through our lawyers." That's when his demeanor changed completely. The pleading, remorseful man disappeared. His face hardened, and his eyes went cold. He leaned across the table and said something that chilled me to the bone. "I know where you're living now," he said, his voice a low, threatening rumble. And then he said my new address. My secret address. I tried not to show the shock and fear that shot through me. "How do you know that?" I asked, my voice miraculously steady. He smirked, a cruel, triumphant little smile. "I have my ways of finding things out. You can't hide from me, Clara." I later realized he must have followed me home from work at some point, which was a deeply unsettling thought. I left the restaurant feeling rattled, the victory of our earlier conversation completely erased by this new, terrifying development. He wasn't just a liar and a manipulator. He was a stalker. The cat-and-mouse game continued for days. He would send messages alternating between apologetic and accusatory. He'd claim he was respecting my space, only to appear in his car in the visitor parking section of my new building. I called security, but he was gone by the time they went out to check. The weekend after our meeting, Eva invited me to spend a couple of days at her family's lake house in the mountains. I desperately needed to get away, to be somewhere he couldn't find me. I told only Stacy where I was going and made her promise not to tell a soul. The lake house was exactly what I needed. Peaceful, isolated, with no cell service except near the main road. On Saturday evening, we were having dinner on the deck when Eva's husband, Ryder, checked a notification on his phone. His expression suddenly changed. He showed the phone to Eva, who looked equally concerned. "What is it?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. Ryder hesitated, then showed me his phone. It was an Instagram post from Thomas. It was a throwback photo of me and Thomas at that very same lake house, from a trip we'd taken 2 years ago. The caption read, "Missing these perfect weekends with my wife. Hope to recreate this special memory soon." I was stunned. He knew. He knew where I was. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. He was sending me a message, "I can always find you." The rest of the weekend was ruined. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When I got back to my apartment on Sunday evening, my fear was confirmed. There was a note taped to my door. It was in his handwriting. It simply said, "We need to talk. This has gone far enough." I took the note directly to the building manager, who checked the security footage. Sure enough, it showed Thomas talking his way past the front desk by claiming he was my brother, dropping off an important document. My own home didn't feel safe anymore. This had to end. The flimsy paper of the note felt heavy with menace in my hand. I took it directly to my building manager, a kind, balding man named Frank. His face grew grim as he watched the security footage. There was Thomas, all charm and smiles, spinning a tale about being my worried brother, just needing to drop off an important document for me. The guard, a young kid who couldn't have been more than 20, had bought it completely. Frank was deeply apologetic and promised to circulate Thomas's photo to all security personnel with strict instructions not to let him into the building under any circumstances, for any reason. I thanked him, but the illusion of safety in my new home had been shattered. He could get to me. He could talk his way past any barrier. The next morning, Thomas sent a long text. He'd clearly realized his note had been discovered and his stalking had crossed a line. He said he'd been thinking about everything and realized his approach wasn't working. He apologized for the Instagram post and for showing up uninvited. He said he was just having trouble accepting that our marriage was over but would now, finally, try to respect my decision. I didn't respond. I'd heard this promise before. It was just another turn in his cycle of abuse: escalate, get a negative reaction, then retreat and apologize, feigning remorse until he was ready to escalate again. I forwarded the text to Paula with a single note, for the record. For about a week, things were quiet. Eerily quiet. No texts, no surprise visits, no flowers at work. For the first time in over a month, I started to relax a little. I allowed a dangerous sliver of hope to enter my mind. Maybe this time it was real. Maybe he had finally accepted reality and was going to leave me alone. Then I looked at the calendar and my blood ran cold. I had completely forgotten. Our wedding anniversary was the following week. I knew him. I knew how his mind worked. An anniversary wasn't a painful reminder of what he'd lost, it was an opportunity. It was the perfect excuse for another grand, public gesture, another manipulative performance designed to paint him as the heartbroken romantic and me as the cold-hearted villain. I decided I would not be a prop in his play. I would be proactive. I arranged to take the day off from work. I called Stacy and we made a plan. We would spend the entire day at a spa in a neighboring city, a place with a strict no-phones policy in the treatment areas. I would be completely unreachable, nowhere near any of my usual locations. I would rob him of his audience. The night before our anniversary, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my unfamiliar bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, thinking about how different my life was from what I'd imagined a year ago. On our last anniversary, we had gone to a fancy dinner, and he had given me a beautiful diamond necklace. We had talked about our future, about the house we wanted to buy. Now, I was literally hiding from him, orchestrating my day to avoid whatever dramatic spectacle he had planned. The grief was a physical weight on my chest, a deep ache for the life I thought I had, for the man I had loved so fiercely, who had turned out to be a complete stranger. Our anniversary came. Stacy picked me up early, and we drove out of the city, leaving my phone in the glove compartment. The spa was a haven of tranquility. We had massages, sat in the steam room, and ate a healthy lunch by a quiet pool. For a few precious hours, I didn't think about Thomas at all. I just focused on the feeling of the warm water, the scent of eucalyptus, the simple pleasure of my friend's company. It was the most peaceful I had felt in months. That evening, when we were driving back to Denver, I finally turned my phone back on. It exploded. Dozens of notifications lit up the screen. I had 23 texts, 7 missed calls, and a slew of social media tags. My heart sank. The messages were from a mix of people. Thomas, of course, but also from my coworkers and several mutual friends, all asking if I was okay. As I pieced together the story from the frantic texts, a picture of the day's disaster emerged. Apparently, Thomas had gone to my office building right at noon. He was carrying an enormous bouquet of what my coworker described as, at least 100 red roses, and, to my absolute horror, he had a photographer with him. His plan, as he'd loudly announced to the receptionist, was to surprise me on my lunch break and recreate our first date, complete with a professional photo shoot. When the receptionist told him I had taken the day off, he'd refused to believe her. He made a scene in the lobby, demanding to know where I was, accusing my coworkers of hiding me from him. He became so agitated and loud that building security had to be called to escort him out of the building. He had been publicly removed from my workplace. But he wasn't done. Humiliated and furious, he had gone home and logged on to Facebook. He had posted a long, rambling public message about fighting for our marriage, about how true love never gives up, about the sanctity of vows. He had tagged me, my parents, his parents, and dozens of our friends. The post included private, intimate details about our relationship that made me cringe with embarrassment and violation. It was a public airing of our private life, meticulously curated to make him look like a tragic hero. I was mortified, but I was also incandescently angry. This was the ultimate manipulation. He was using public spectacle and social pressure to try and force my hand, knowing how much I hate being the center of drama, how much I value my privacy. The next day, after the dust from the anniversary disaster had barely settled, the entire situation imploded in a way I could never have predicted. It started with a Facebook post from Charles, Thomas's brother. He posted a vague but pointed rant: family loyalty is one thing, but there's a line. Some people need to learn to back the hell off and respect other people's boundaries. This obsession is unhealthy and it's destroying everyone. At first, I thought maybe I was reading too much into it. But then I saw the comments. Paula, Charles's wife, wrote, "Finally. Someone said it." Then, Thomas himself responded, "Real family doesn't stab you in the back when you're down." And then Arlene jumped in, her comment a furious all-caps tirade: "Charles I am so disappointed in you. How dare you be so ungrateful and disloyal to your own brother." It turned into a massive, public family meltdown, right there on Facebook for all their friends and relatives to see. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Stacy's cousin, who works with Paula, started texting Stacy screenshots of everything before the whole thread was eventually deleted. She had the inside story. Apparently, what had finally happened is that Charles had discovered Thomas had been going through his phone, trying to find my new address, which Charles didn't even have. When Charles confronted him about the invasion of privacy, Thomas had flipped out. He'd run straight to Arlene and told her that Charles was taking my side against the family. Arlene, completely predictably, had called Charles's house at 2 a.m, screaming at him about how he was betraying his brother in his time of need. According to Paula, Thomas then showed up at their house around midnight, drunk and demanding they help him fix things with me. When they refused, he started accusing Charles of always being jealous of him, of trying to sabotage his relationships. The whole thing had exploded into a family civil war. Even Arlene's own sister had jumped into the Facebook comments, writing, "Arlene, you need to stop enabling Thomas's obsessive behavior. You're not helping him." Her words, not mine. I just sat on my sofa, watching their entire family implode, all stemming from that one original lie Thomas had told months ago. He had made himself the victim for so long, and now, the one time his brother refused to play along with his narrative, Thomas turned on him with the same venom he had turned on me. It was actually terrifying, seeing how quickly his mask dropped with his own family. If he was willing to destroy his relationship with his brother over this, what would he have done to me if I had gone back? The weirdest part was that I hadn't had to do a thing. They were all turning on each other without any input from me. Thomas's web of manipulation, so carefully spun, had finally backfired. It was honestly both satisfying and profoundly scary to watch. The man who had tried so hard to control the story had lost control of everything. After that spectacular Facebook meltdown, a strange and wonderful thing happened: silence. For a full week, Thomas went completely dark. No texts, no calls, no drive-bys, no public declarations of love, no certified letters. It was like he had vanished from the face of the earth. The family civil war he had ignited was apparently consuming all of his energy. Part of me was relieved, but another, more cynical part was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was starting to think maybe he'd finally backed himself into a corner he couldn't talk his way out of, when I was served with divorce papers at work. This time, there were no flowers or photographers. Just a stoic process server who handed me a thick manila envelope in the lobby, right in front of the same receptionist who had witnessed Thomas's anniversary day tantrum. I stood there, holding the papers, completely bewildered. He had filed first. After months of stalking me, refusing to accept it was over, and proclaiming his undying love all over the internet, he was the one pulling the final plug. At first, I was confused as hell. It made no sense. This was the man who, just 2 weeks prior, was accusing his own brother of betrayal for not helping him win me back. Then my lawyer, Paula, called. I just got off the phone with his attorney, she said, a note of surprise in her voice. Clara, he wants a quick, uncontested divorce. He's proposing a simple 50-50th split of all marital assets. No alimony, no fighting, just sign the papers and be done with it. After all his dramatic, exhausting, fighting for our marriage nonsense, he suddenly wanted out, and he wanted out ASAP. Paula was suspicious, and so was I. It felt like another trap. What's the catch? I asked her. I don't know yet, she admitted. But honestly, if he's being this reasonable, we should probably take the opportunity and run with it. This is the cleanest, fastest exit you could hope for. 2 days later, I found out why. The reason wasn't delivered in a text or a letter, but on Instagram. Thomas had posted a new photo. It was a picture of him with a smiling, super fit-looking woman at what looked like a rock-climbing gym. They were both in harnesses, looking flushed and happy. The caption read, "Sometimes the universe has other plans for you. So grateful for new beginnings." He had started dating someone new. Already. Some girl from his gym. Stacy did some light-hearted digging and confirmed it through a friend of a friend. He'd been seeing her for at least a couple of weeks, possibly even before the big family blow-up. And just like that, everything clicked into place. The sudden silence. The quick-file divorce. The generous terms. It wasn't about him finally respecting my boundaries or coming to his senses. It was about clearing the deck for his new narrative. He needed to be officially single, and fast, so he could launch his new relationship. He couldn't be the noble, heartbroken husband fighting for his wife if he was simultaneously posting gym selfies with a new girlfriend. The audacity of the man was truly breathtaking. He had obsessively stalked and harassed me for weeks, and the moment a new source of attention came along, he dropped me like a hot rock. Honestly, I was so damn relieved. All the anger and fear I had been carrying for months just evaporated. It was replaced by a profound sense of liberation. He hadn't changed. He hadn't grown. He had just found a new target. I called Paula immediately. "Draw up the papers," I said. "I'll sign them tomorrow." I signed those papers so fast, my hand barely skimmed the page. My lawyer was like, "Maybe read them first." But they were exactly what she'd said they'd be. A 50-50 split, no alimony, a clean break. He even agreed to let me keep all the wedding gifts from my side of the family without a single argument. We were officially divorced 3 weeks later. The final decree arrived in the mail on a Tuesday morning, and I felt nothing but peace. The fallout with his family, from what I could gather through Scarlett and Stacy's cousin, has been wild. That Facebook fight was just the beginning. Charles and Arlene are basically not speaking to each other anymore, especially after Charles told her she needed therapy for her codependent obsession with controlling Thomas's life. Paula told Stacy's cousin that Arlene actually showed up at the gym to meet and approve of the new girlfriend. The new girl, whose name is apparently Tiffany, must have passed the test, because now Arlene's Facebook is filled with pictures of her, with gushing captions calling her the daughter I always wanted. It's such a direct, pathetic dig at me that I find it hilarious rather than hurtful. Thomas texted me last week. It was the first time I'd heard from him since the divorce was finalized. "Hey," it read. Just wanted to say I appreciate how maturely you handled everything in the end. I truly wish you all the best. This, from the man who was basically stalking me 2 months ago. The man who threatened to ruin my life with lies. The man who grabbed my arm in public and ambushed me in my own home. I didn't respond, because what was there to say? It just proved, once and for all, how quickly and completely he rewrites history in his own head to fit whatever narrative makes him the hero. As for me, I just signed a 1-year lease on a new apartment in a different neighborhood, a place with a balcony and lots of natural light. Last week, I got a big promotion at work, one I've been working toward for years. I have zero interest in dating anyone anytime soon. The idea of trusting another person that intimately feels a million miles away, and that's okay. For now, my own company is more than enough. Paula actually helped me draft a cease and desist letter, ready to be sent if Thomas or any of his family ever starts their nonsense again. But so far, he's been far too obsessed with creating his new, perfect relationship narrative to bother with me. Every single one of our mutual friends now knows exactly what happened. Not because I went on a smear campaign of my own. I didn't have Tobit because Thomas's behavior was so erratic, so public, and so self-destructive that nobody believes his version of events anymore. His lies had a shelf life, and they expired in the most spectacular way possible. So that's it. It's over. I'm officially divorced from a man who told his family I manipulated him into marriage, publicly humiliated me at his mom's birthday, threatened to accuse me of cheating, stalked me for weeks, and then suddenly moved on like none of it ever happened. The emotional whiplash of the past few months has been unreal. Looking back at my first moments of shock, that day I had lunch with Scarlett, I can't believe I ever questioned whether I was overreacting. This man, and his mother, showed me exactly who they were. They were cruel, they were manipulative, and they were weak. And I am so damn glad I got out before I wasted any more years of my life with them. I survived. I'm free. And my new life, a life that is truly and completely my own, is just beginning.